call me Grandma. And I'm Stuart. I'm so glad you could join us. We just got back from picking flowers from my garden. But I made sure we did not pick too many because it takes a lot of work for the plants to grow. It does? Yes, and that's why you should always finish your dinner so none of the plant's hard work goes to waste. I know. My dinner has proteins that I need to grow. But do you know where the molecules that make up the protein's building blocks, or amino acids, come from? Well, I think they come from our food. Well, yes, but let's take a closer look. Take it away, narrator.
Certainly. Proteins and nucleic acids all need a special element in order to function.
What is it?
They all need nitrogen. It's one of the elements that make up organic polymers, which are the molecules that make up all living things.
Oh, yeah. The other three are carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, right?
Yes, but we also need sodium, potassium, sulfur, and phosphorus. Nitrogen is only found in proteins and nucleic acids.
Oh, my.
But the way most organisms receive nitrogen is a bit tricky. Remember, the other three elements can be taken in through breathing, drinking, and eating.
So where is nitrogen, and how do we get it?
Isn't that the question? Well, about 78% of the air all around us is nitrogen.
So why can't we breathe it in and use it that way? Because it's triple bonded, which can be represented as N2.
This means that it is incredibly hard to break apart, which most organisms can't do. One way of breaking the bonds is through lightning. However, this produces a very small amount of usable nitrogen and doesn't happen on a regular basis. Thankfully, there are other ways to break nitrogen apart.
Like what?
Well, there are special types of plants that are able to extract the nitrogen from their prey.
Oh, like Venus flytraps?
Yes. You see, Venus flytraps live in nitrogen-poor soil and need to find other ways to get nitrogen. They have a sweet and sticky nectar that is delicious to bugs and distracts them from 6 tiny hairs that can detect the presence of a bug. When the hairs are triggered by the bug's movement, the trap shuts. Then, digestive glands on the edge of the leaf secrete fluids in order to break down parts of the prey, kill bacteria and fungi, and extract the essential nutrients. The extraction of the nutrients is done by taking the tissues of the bug, which contain nitrogen, from the bug, so after a couple of days when the trap reopens, all that is left is the waste and the bug skeleton.
That's so cool. Plants have to get their nutrients just like we do.
Yes, that's true, but most plants don't do what Venus flytraps do.
What do you mean? Well, honey, what if Venus flytraps trap to get their food? Insects? But do you see old plants trapping bugs? I guess not.
Most plants take in nitrogen in a different way. They absorb nitrogen through their roots using a process called diffusion.
What's diffusion? It's the probability of movement of particles from a higher concentration to a lower concentration.
For most plants, the nitrogen diffuses from the water and soil into their roots and then up through their stems and gets incorporated into their tissues.
But we said before that it's triple bonded, so how can plants do what it does? Not all plants are Venus flytraps.
I'll show you. Nitrogen is in the air all around us, but we can't get it because it is triple bonded.
I know that already.
There are special nitrogen-fixing bacteria that are found in soil and water. The most common bacteria is called cyanobacteria. Nitrogen in the air gets fixed into ammonia, which turns into ammonium when it's combined with water. The bacteria use nitrogenase, which is the only biological enzyme that can break triple bonds to make ammonium usable. After ammonia has been made, nitrifying bacteria turns ammonia into nitrate and nitrite. Another place that nitrogen-fixing bacteria are found is in a type of plants called legumes. These plants have special root nodules that can house these bacteria. These plants have a mutualistic relationship with bacteria. This means that they both benefit from the other. The bacteria receive a home and food from the plant's nodules, while the plant's nodules receive usable nitrogen to live. These bacteria, which can fix anywhere from 20 to 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre annually, produce a surplus of nitrogen which is then excreted into the soil. The bacteria are able to directly supply about 90% into the plant's tissues, mostly in the form of amino acids. So after the now usable nitrogen is incorporated into the plant's tissues, that's where it will stay until it dies or is eaten by something else.
So basically, plants can only use ammonium, nitrite, and nitrate. The ions come from the dissociated water and combine with ammonia to make ammonium. Yes, Stuart, now you're getting it. And they get the nitrates and nitrates from other things being broken down.
Glad you got it.
But how do we get the nitrogen?
The overall cycle of nitrogen for plants is it gets into the plant, gets eaten, gets excreted somehow, and then finds its way back into the plant. After the nitrogen that came from the water in the soil has been absorbed through the roots and the bacteria breaks it down, the now usable nitrogen is incorporated into the proteins of the plant. Then, this is where I come in. That's right, but it would be nice if you would just let me explain. Of course, I just got a little excited. Now, with the nitrogen incorporated in its tissues, the plant gets eaten. The animal eats it and then does one of two things. It either incorporates the amino acids it has digested into its own tissues, or it excretes them. And by excrete, I mean pee them out.
Ew! Hush now, you do it too.
Now, poop is the easiest way for the nitrogen to get back into the soil. The nitrogen gets put back into the soil or back into the air because there are decomposing bacteria in soil that make the nitrogen from amino acids into ammonia. There are also denitrifying bacteria that take the nitrogen and put it back into the air in a triple bond. The other option, as stated earlier, is for the proteins to be incorporated into the animal's tissues. This is only with 10% of the biomass that the animal eats.
What's biomass?
Biomass is the weight of something without any water. After living whatever life the cow decides, it dies. It decomposes. The same thing that can happen to the poop happens to the dead body with decomposing bacteria. There is sort of a third option as well.
What?
The animal can get eaten.
What?
Calm down, it's just what happens. Basically, the cycle stays the same. The human still either gets nitrogen back into the cycle by pooping or dying. The only difference is that, compared to cows, there's 10% less nitrogen used in tissue.
Because we only incorporate 10% of the biomass of what we eat, right?
Yes. Shall we review?
Yes.
1. Nitrogen is in the air all around us, but we can't use it because it's triple bonded. 2. Bacteria with specific enzymes in legume plants can incorporate nitrogen into proteins in their tissues. They can only incorporate nitrogen in the form of ammonium nitrates or nitrites. 3. Animals eat plants, and based on our understanding of the 10% rule, they incorporate 10% of the biomass of the plant into their tissue. Then, possibly, the animal gets eaten by someone higher on the food chain, not necessarily a human, and 10% of the first consumer's biomass gets incorporated into the second consumer's tissue. 4. The nitrogen gets back into the soil or air either by A. Any of the consumers pooping, or B. Any of the consumers dying. 5. The cycle starts all over again with the plants taking nitrogen from the air or soil.
Wow, so nitrogen is really cool. Yes, and thanks to George Washington Carver, we get more of it. Who's that?
He advocated for diversifying of crops, something the Native Americans already knew to do, which led to the production of fertilizer, which is another way to get usable nitrogen. So for different plants that are not near legumes and do not have nodules themselves, the extra nitrogen in the soil makes for a healthier plant. Other scientists contributed to the use of fertilizers, such as Haber and Bosch.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
However, there are consequences to using too much fertilizer. If there's too much nitrogen in the soil when it rains, the nitrogen can go into nearby water and cause algae to grow. This algae uses up the nitrogen the same way plants do, but this process also requires oxygen. At a certain point, there is no more oxygen left in the water, so the algae die along with everything else in that body of water. This process is called eutrophication. Excessive nutrients in a body of water, which causes growth of plant life and death of animal life from lack of oxygen, and eventually the entire water source becomes a dead zone.
Drain will occurs. So next time you pass by a plant, thank it for providing us with the nitrogen that we can use. Goodbye.
Goodbye.